Because of our weakness and sin and failure, we don't deserve to be carried. It's true. But if you're a Christian, because of Jesus, he loves you. He loves to carry you. He's a father beyond our expectations. He carries us. He's a father beyond comparison. He guides us. Lastly, he's a father beyond our deserving as well. Let's look at the last two verses in Isaiah 46. Would you look at that with me? Listen to me, you stubborn of heart, you who are far from righteousness. I bring near my righteousness. It is not far off. And my salvation will not delay. I will put salvation in Zion. For Israel, my glory. You know, we've already seen sometimes life can be pretty dark. And the future is definitely dark to our minds. But often, if we're honest, we also know that the darkness extends into our own hearts. Our motives, our words, our actions, our attitudes are spotted with darkness. And we read that God will carry us, but then, there's carry us. He might carry big kids, we learned, but what about bad kids? Why would God carry us? Us who this verse identifies as stubborn of heart. Us who this verse identifies as far from righteousness. The question is, why would our Father carry us when we don't deserve it? How can we rely on a Father to carry us into tomorrow when we've been so bad in the past? And these verses point in a solution. The answer is that one day God would, quote, put salvation in Zion, and that God's own righteousness would be brought near, our verse says. Now, we know our Bibles. If you've been around church any time at all, you know what Isaiah is talking about. You know what he's pointing to. Because there was a day when God sent his Son into this world to be that righteousness and to bring that salvation. And on that day, the Father wasn't using an evil and pagan king, but a righteous and deserving king. And this man's name wasn't Cyrus. The man of God's choosing was Jesus. This was God's Son. I want you to focus in. I need you to think with me about the fact that Jesus is God's Son. Jesus has always been God's Son. If Jesus had become the Son of God, even if that had happened like a gazillion years before creation, then there would have been a time, an eternity before, when God was not Father. But God didn't ever become a father. The Bible teaches us that God is Father. That's who he is. He has never, ever been just generic God, plain old God. Instead, he's always had a son. And that means he's always been a father. So when Jesus, in the Garden of Gethsemane, in a dark time, prays to his Father and says, Abba, Father, he is speaking from a position of being eternally loved. This is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased. God the Father has always loved and cherished his perfect and deserving Son. And Abba, which means father, is what Jesus called his father, is the rightful and when we hear that, it is the rightful and deserving son speaking to his father. That's the word he used. And this, brothers and sisters, this is why the Father carries people like us. We don't deserve to call God Father, but there was one Son who did. And when we become Christians, we belong to him, to Jesus. When we turn from our way, when we turn from our rebellion against God, or we turn away from our righteousness for God, our way, and we turn to Jesus, he is the way to the Father, the only way. When that happens, we are united to the deserving, beloved Son. In all our darkness, we stand, as it were, in his shoes. And his role as son and righteousness as son are declared to be ours. And when we pray, Abba, the significance isn't in the meaning of the term, the significance is in the source of the term. That's the word of Jesus, the deserving son to his Father. And when we pray it, it's like we're using the login to a massive bank account that belongs to someone else. Because of our weakness and sin and failure, we don't deserve to be carried. It's true. But if you're a Christian, because of Jesus, because Jesus is the Son that the Father loves with all his heart, he loves you. And he loves to carry you. You. I'm talking to you today who are filled with regret, shame, guilt. Talking to you who feel like you disappoint yourself and people around you. You who are full of pride that most of the time you don't even notice. He loves you like he loves his Son. And he loves to carry you. Over 20 years ago, I heard this story about George Truett. He was a pastor in Texas in the first half of the 20th century. And he told the story about in his church there was a strong and strapping young man named Tom. Tom and his wife were believers, had only been married a few years, and they had a little girl. And when the daughter was still a little child, Tom lost his wife. And Pastor Truett remembered going to the graveside and wanting to have some words of comfort for this husky man holding the tiny hand of his little girl. And sometime later, Tom went to his pastor and told him what had happened that night when he took his daughter home to their dark and empty house. He helped his little girl get ready for bed, his big fingers fumbling with the tiny buttons of her pajamas. He turned off the light, the bed and rocking chair silhouetted in the shadows. And when he was getting ready to put her in bed, his daughter looked up and said, "Daddy, could you rock me like Mommy used to?" And Tom said, "Of course," and picked her up in his strong arms and carried her across the room and rocked her until he thought she was asleep. And when he went to lay her in her bed, her eyes flew open and she said, "Daddy, it's so dark in here. Couldn't you please rock me a little more?" And the big man sat back down and rocked his little girl to sleep and placed her in her bed. And then the man slumped back into the chair and he stared up into the darkness at the ceiling and said, "Oh God, it is so dark in here. Couldn't you rock me a little?" And the man told his pastor that that's exactly what God had done. God the Father stooped down to this man who was grieving, this man in his darkness, this man in his need, and he took him in his arms and he carried him. And that's what he'll do for you. If you stop trying to carry yourself, to be so good, to amend for all the bad, will you let him carry you? He's a father more than capable of carrying, of holding you through the darkest night. This is our Father. Would you pray with me?